The Chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. Great to have you back.
Good morning. Always good to be with you, Hugh.
Thank you, Ronna. I want to begin with item number 18 in news items by John Ellis this morning. It's a summary of a Politico article. It reads, Democrats have been on a voter registration tear since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. There's just one problem for them. They are digging out from a major Republican gains in the last 18 months. For most of the 2 years leading up to the midterm election, Republicans, rather than Democrats, were making voting registration gains in key state. A political analysis of state voter data shows a signal of GOP momentum heading into a classic backlash election against Democratic control of Washington, D.C. Ronna, if our registration is up, that's on you. Congratulations.
Thank you. We've definitely been working on that. It's our team. The RNC stayed on the ground after 2020 and made this a priority. So in states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, you have seen us outpace the Democrats in voter registration, which is going to be key heading into this election.
There was an attempt in the summer after the Dobbs decision by legacy media to say Democrats had momentum because the president forgave student loans feeling inflation, passed a big CHIPS Act with Republican help, but then also spent another $700 billion in the reconciliation, and then Dobbs. I don't think they've got momentum, Chairwoman McDaniel. What do you think?
I agree with you. I actually think the student loan forgiveness decision by Democrats backfired on them, on top of the Death Star speech that Biden gave, calling 74 million Republicans pretty much awful people and semi-fascists. And we have seen a tightening in all the polls in the Senate races, and we feel momentum heading into November.
I'm feeling bad for the president. He was lost on his stage again yesterday, Chairwoman McDaniel. So I'm kind of feeling the red setting, red wedding speech was a nightmare. I haven't heard it called the Death Star speech before. I like that as well. Let's start with the Senate, then move to the House, then move to the governorships. Ronna McDaniel. Republicans have to hold Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and North Carolina. I think Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina are locked up tight. I think PA is 50-50. What's your assessment?
I would agree. I think Ron Johnson's in a tough race in Wisconsin. They're going to spend a lot of money there, too, but the polling has been showing him ahead. JD's been very strong in Ohio. North Carolina, Ted Budd's been doing well, and that's a state where we've had big voter registration gains, and we did very well in 2020 across the board. So I agree. I think Pennsylvania's 50-50. Oz is closing, though, and it's peaking at the right time in some of these states, and I think he's doing the right thing, hitting Fetterman on crime. And that is really the issue that's moving the needle in Pennsylvania right now.
Okay, tough question that people split on. Who is more radical, Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin or John Fetterman in Pennsylvania?
Oh, I think it's a tie for radical, pro-criminal, crazy socialist policies. I mean, they've been terrible, but it's frightening when you look at the type of prisoners that they have been part of releasing or called for being released. It is really, really radical what they're willing to do to their states. And I think as the voters get a look at them and what their policies are and their records, it's waking them up and bringing them to the Republicans.
Now, voting begins in Minnesota tomorrow, Chairwoman McDaniel. I had Tom Weiler on yesterday. He's running in the 3rd Congressional District. Great candidate. I've been having all these would-be freshman Republicans on, great candidates. What do we do in a place like Minnesota when early voting starts? I think it's going to be September 23rd tomorrow. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, we have an election integrity person or a data person on the ground in Minnesota. We have some staff. We're more congressionally focused in Minnesota. We also have to keep the Hagedorn seat, which unfortunately he passed away earlier this year. So we just get our poll watchers, which we've been training, and make sure that we have a good operation to watch not just Election Day, but also the counting before Election Day in a lot of these absentee ballot voting areas.
All right, let's go back to the Senate. There are 3 that I count as likeliest pickups. I think Herschel's going to win in Georgia. I feel so confident about that because he's the nicest guy in Georgia. I think Adam Laxalt's going to win in Nevada. They've had it with the invisible senator. But I also think in the top 3 is a surprise. Joe O'Dea is going to win in Colorado. Those are my top 3 pickups. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I like them all 3. I still put Blake Masters in there. I think Blake is doing a good job in surging and really hitting the issues hard. And the more he exposes Mark Kelly as being the one vote that could have stopped the Biden administration, knowing what's happening in Arizona on the border and his refusal to do that, I think it really hits home. And then I still have hope for Don Bolduc in New Hampshire. So I'm with you. And Tiffany Smiley, I was on a plane with her yesterday in Washington, and she's just amazing.
That's my second tier, and I actually have three tiers because I put Blake Master. My most confidence are in Georgia, Nevada, and Colorado. Then I have Blake, who is on in hour number one. Then I have Washington and New Hampshire. So let's talk about Arizona. Do you remember, Ronna? You weren't the chairwoman yet. It might have been during the benighted reign of Michael Steele, but Ed Gillespie almost beat Mark Warner, and the polls said he was 9 points down in 2014. That's what I tell everyone. You just can't believe these polls. They're always wrong.
You can't. And we actually showed this a couple weeks ago, Hugh, to a lot of our investors, which is there's a pattern. It goes all the way to 2014, like you said. But even in 2020, there was not a single poll that had Susan Collins winning. Tom Tillis was behind in North Carolina. And part of this is to suppress support for Republican candidates, I think from the big donors, actually, and then to ramp up support for Democrats. And it has been wrong. If the media, the legacy media was correct, then we would have lost 15 House seats in 2020 instead of picking up 15 House seats. They're just wrong. So I think everybody needs to get out, work as hard for these candidates. Momentum's on our side. And I think if you look at the polls, they always underrepresent Republican voters. That's what I think is consistent.
Now, I work for the Washington Post, so I hate to say this, but I always bring it up. ABC News, Washington Post poll of Wisconsin the week before the 2020 presidential election said Joe Biden had a 17-point lead. Joe Biden won by 0.6% in Wisconsin. I go back to the Mark Warner, Ed Gillespie. I can go back to the Matt Bevin. There are incredible misses. And I think if there's one place they're going to miss, it's Arizona. And I think they could miss big in Arizona, Ronna.
I do too. Listen, Carrie Lake is running a strong strong race at the top of the ticket for governor. I think she's going to win. I think Blake, I spent a lot of time with Blake on my podcast. I'm actually releasing my podcast with him today on Real America, and I love him. I think he's a great candidate. He will be a value add in the Senate with his tech experience and understanding what Google and Facebook and others are doing. But we also have a lot of competitive House races in Arizona, and that gets overlooked. Look at Juan Ciscomani. He's going to win that seat. We're going to flip some House seats, which is going to drive turnout for the top of the ticket too.
Juan Ciscomani is a superstar in Tucson, and he's been on a couple of times. Let me go then to the House. So we got the Senate laid out. I'm feeling very good about Leader McConnell returning as Leader McConnell. I think the over-under for the House is 25. That is where, if I was Las Vegas and setting the odds, I think the GOP may pick up more than 25. They might not pick up as many 25 a year and over, and the under on that, Ronna McDaniel.
I never like setting a number in the sand, but I think that's a good number. I think that's a fair number. Listen, when people were saying 50, 60, I thought it was outrageous because we're already starting at 214. We need 5 to take back the House, right? So you look at the Obama, when we won 63, we were starting at 178. Comparing those two is just not fair when we picked up 15 last cycle. The red wave started then when we picked up 15 in 2020. So I think 20 to 25 is a really good night. For me, winning back the House, 5 is a great night retiring Nancy Pelosi. We just have to make sure we fight the Democrats everywhere. They want to hold on to power. They will do anything to keep it. And we want to make this election about helping the American people. This is an American people first election for the Republican Party.
When I talked to former President Trump last week, I said the Republicans want to talk about inflation, crime, and the border. They want to talk about education in China. Democrats want to talk about abortion and you, Mr. President. And we talked about that. But I want to ask you, in terms of education, I've encouraged this audience not to vote for one school board member who they are not absolutely certain opposes mandatory masking and shutdowns of school. If they have any doubt at all, don't vote for him. Is education the Republicans' secret weapon in this election?
Totally. The amount of people running for school board for the first time, the moms that have been so enraged by what happened to their kids, and dads too, that are getting out there, just like we saw in Virginia. There's an undercurrent of that across the country. I run into it everywhere I go. I know that I'm doing the same thing. I'm researching all the signs in my community. I know I'm not voting for a single incumbent school board member. I don't care who they are. I don't care if one of them's my next door neighbor. I won't vote for them because what they did to my kids. And no more lockdowns, no more mandates.
And I want to close by state legislatures. This is the hidden metric. You had big wins, the RNC did in the 2020 cycle with state legislatures. It saved redistricting from being a complete Illinois and Massachusetts jam down gerrymander. So we got a couple of states gerrymandered for us, and that's good. It's the way the system's supposed to work. What do you think about state legislative houses in the aftermath of redistricting? It's very hard for me to get visibility into that, Chairwoman.
Yeah, it's going to be state by state, and turnout will be a factor. And I think, as good as the bottom of the ticket does, as well as the top of the ticket does, that's going to determine these state legislative races. I think Michigan, for example, is going to have an interesting election because you're going to have abortion on the ballot. So that's going to change the complexion of the race. But I feel good. I think we're going to pick up more seats. But I can't. We're more focused on federal. Senate and House at the RNC. So that's where my eyes are right now.
Let's close by talking about redwin.com, one of your inventions during your tenure of RNC, along with Kevin McCarthy and Leader McConnell. How's it working? WinRed.
WinRed is, it's doing great. I mean, listen, Hugh, when I was chair in 2018, the Democrats raised $300 million more than our candidates on Act Blue just on the House side. And they were able to spend 6-7 to 1 against all of our candidates, which was part of the reason we lost the House. With WinRed, we now have a small dollar fundraising operation for our candidates, and it's allowing them to get their message on TV. We need people to keep donating, give to every single Senate candidate, give to these House candidates. It is the best way for them to get their message out and fight the Democrats. The Democrats have Act Blue. It's been around for 20 years, so it's way ahead of us. We needed this desperately, and I think it's doing a good job.
It's doing a great job. WinRed.com. If you don't know who to support, WinRed.com will send your money to the right place.
Yeah,
just
you
give
can click on your state. You can just give to the RNC. We're out there supporting the candidates, and it is critical that we have. I know we win if we have the resources. That's the biggest issue. They're going to have more resources because they've got Soros and Zuckerberg and Bloomberg. We don't have those big guys. We need to be funded by our small dollar, and our American support will help us.
Ronna McDaniel, always a pleasure. Keep coming back. Voting begins tomorrow, so the election is underway. And if the Republicans do well, it'll be because of that lady, Ronna McDaniel. Thank you, Chairwoman.